Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. Hope you all are having a great week. If it is your first time joining us today, hello, nice to meet you. I'm Rachel. Thanks for the data science community to chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and getting to learn about what's going on in the world of data science across different industries. And so each week we feature a different data science leader as my co-host to help lead our discussion and answer questions from you all. So together, we're all dedicated to creating a welcoming environment for everyone. So I love when we can hear from everybody, no matter your level of experience or area of work or industry each week. It is totally okay to just listen in as well. But there's also 3 ways to ask questions today and provide your own perspective on certain topics too. So you could jump in by raising your hand here on Zoom. You can put questions into the Zoom chat, and feel free to just put a little star next to it if you want me to read it out loud, if you're in a coffee shop or something. And then we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously, and our team should be sharing that in the chat in just a second here. But I do like to make sure I tell everybody up front, we share the recordings of each session to the Posit YouTube, also the Data Science Hangout site. So you can always go back and rewatch or share with a friend. I wanted to remember to call this out too. I wanted to specifically say, if you are hiring right now, feel free to share that in the chat. I never see that as spammy. I know sometimes people ask. It's so awesome to be able to hear when roles are filled by people making connections here in the Hangout too. Thank you so much, Satish, for joining us as the co-host today. Satish is Senior Manager, Pharma R&D IT at Janssen. And I also wanted to say thank you real quick to the Ataurus team as well, who are one of our full service partners at Posit, and they actually helped me in scheduling today's session with Satish. So the Ataurus team, if you want to wave and say hello to everybody or say hi in the chat too. But Satish, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role. Maybe also something you like to do outside of work too.
Yeah, I'm Satish Murthy. I'm a part of the Janssen R&D IT. I have responsibility primarily for the R platform, R, and soon Python as well. It's a data science platform to help our scientists run through some reporting for clinical trial, whether it is top-line reporting using grid-based computing. It's an environment where the traditional SAS is supported as well, but there is an accelerated growth to have folks move on to R at this time.
Thank you, Satish. And just something that you like to do outside of work too. It's always fun to hear those from everybody.
Yeah, there is a small hiking place near my place, near my house in Hillsborough. I live in New Jersey. Saarland Mountains, for those of you who are close by, that's where we hike often. I do have a small dog, and with 2 kids, we go out with my wife anytime we can.
That's awesome. So Satish, as we wait for questions to come in from everybody here, I'd love to hear what's something that, this is a question we tend to ask a lot of people, what is something that you're excited about in the year ahead for your team?
Yeah, as I indicated earlier, we have the statistical program and compute engine, what is called SPACE, inside Janssen to help our scientists. One of the things that we are looking forward is to add capabilities to this platform because, as the adoption grows, as, folks slowly start seeing the power of R and the open source community support that has really been the big reason for us to adopt R, because, there is always learn from others' experience as well, right? So we are trying to see how we can grow the R use case and adopt it, number one, and at the same time enable other tools and technologies that our users are asking. For example, we just introduced for some of the folks who were wanting to leverage Python, we just added the capability as well. One of the things that I'm proud of is, this is all in a validated environment. There are some challenges that come along with it, and we are partnering with Atora's team to help us with the validation aspect of it. Any GXP platform, as folks might know, there are two things in there. One is a formal verification that somebody traditional in IT like myself would be responsible for it, because it's crucial. And we have to build a platform like this. It's absolutely essential that we have to do a repeated install of this just to prove that what we installed today is the same thing that we can install tomorrow, because that will increase the user confidence. The other aspect of it is the validation. What we have installed, are the users comfortable with the confidence that what they run today, they're going to get the same results? That is the formal verification / validation process that we are partnering with Atora's to build some of the capabilities to support us in that effort. As we continue to add platforms, of course, we have to keep up with technology. We have to keep up with what is out there. And some of the things that I'm looking forward is, traditionally, if I have to wear a development hat at this time, some of the platforms that we are running are on RHEL 7. As we think about, RHEL 7 rather sunsetting, what is it that we need to do to build on RHEL 8 platforms? What are the tools that are available? So that is what is I'm looking forward from that perspective, because that's an immediate challenge, as folks might know. We are RHEL 7 is going out of support by end of this year, with an additional 6 months of extended support formally by Red Hat. But beyond that, we have to think about something. This is a little bit more tactical in nature, but we have to go through the entire process of migrating to a new platform.
Thank you, Satish. And I see Eric commenting on the migrations as well. I was just going to ask, so for someone like myself who isn't in the pharma industry and is not familiar with like more of the admin side of things, what does like having a validated environment really mean?
Good question. Validated environment to me is, say for example, pharma and finance, as another example, are regulated industries, correct? What it means is, anytime a health reporting agency comes and asks for proof, we have to be comfortable in saying that what we ran a couple of days ago, months ago, weeks ago, or years ago, we need to be in a position to replicate that entire environment as is. So this goes through a formal validation / verification process. And this, in traditional parlance, is known as a GXP platform. GXP is good. X will stand for clinical practice, manufacturing practice, lab practice. So the verification validated environment is often referred to as a GXP environment. So it is to build confidence for the end users that we serve in pharma. It is for folks who want to help deliver patient care, which is crucial. This is where the validated environment, or this is what the validated environment is, Rachel.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I did see there are a few anonymous questions starting to come in, so I want to go ask one over there. But somebody had asked, when talking about we hear a lot from a data science or engineering perspective. What do you think the differences in thought are from an IT perspective?
From an IT perspective, yeah, good question. So the one advantage that we have with R is, as I mentioned earlier, the power of open source, where folks are contributing to the R ecosystem as such. So there are more and more folks who are contributing to it. It could be, at the end of the day, it's a traditional R package that gets developed. And often what we are seeing is, from an IT perspective, there are some challenges in reproducing this platform as is. Sometimes, the frustration that our users have is, hey, it worked yesterday. How, why am I, I tried the exact same thing today. Why am I having issues with that? And there are various reasons. That's because, an underlying, we might be using version 1 of one particular package, but underneath that, it will go and pull certain dependencies, which could be a function of time. But there are tools that are available today to help us with that approach. In other words, there is an R package that folks are familiar with, RENB as an example, where you can lock the versions. We are also using the POSIT package manager as well to help us with snapshotting capabilities. And this is where IT can step in, implement these tools so that users can be confident that what they did today, they should be able to reproduce the same environment tomorrow as well.
So Bill had asked, do you have SAS and R running on the same validated server? Is that server in the cloud, and is that managed by an external service provider? Maybe I'll try and break this up into multiple questions, but Bill also asks, are you having a hard time finding a cloud hosting service provider? Who is doing that for you today?
Fair question. One, we have completely adopted a cloud, at least inside Janssen. Most of what we do, it is with a cloud provider, and we have a huge investment with AWS. We are partnering with AWS as and when we would want new capabilities. We do work with them and see where they could help us implement certain services that we would need. Now, AWS might be ready, but then our technology services team would want to ensure, because it's in the cloud, that there are several security policies in place. So we do have to go through them to ensure that the services offered by any cloud service provider is blessed by our security team. That's that's how we work. Number two, I think there was a question was. Yeah, right. Yeah. So we run everything in AWS. I don't want to call it a server hosting SAS and R because, end of the day, from a tactical perspective, these are different assets, but it is a part of the same ecosystem, as I mentioned earlier. That is the statistical and program compute environment, which is a validated platform. Think of it as a platform consisting of multiple components. SAS is one of them. R is another, 100% validated at this time.
Great,
I don't know,
you.
Rachel, if there was another question there. Was there another?
No, I think that was great. And Bill, feel free to put in the chat if you wanted any more context on that too. But I see, Eric, you just added a question to the chat too. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. It's great to virtually see you again, Satish. We've had some great conversations in the past. I really admire what your team is doing to push, really novel uses of tech. I'd be curious if you could tell this group more about how containerization is helping play a role in your cloud deployments on AWS, and how have you had any issues integrating those technology together? And also, how are you kind of getting your data science colleagues, your statistician colleagues on board with using these platforms that depend on these services? If you could elaborate on that.
Certainly. So I mentioned AWS, but one of the key components of this is containerization, Eric, as you rightfully pointed. Yeah, I was hoping that somebody would ask that question. So everything in a validated environment, because the need or the ask is to ensure repeatability and reproducibility, the only logical choice at this time is containers. We try to containerize, we have to. It's not that we need to, we have to containerize. So the space platform, I have a responsibility for the R part of it. So I'm going to concentrate a little bit more there. So one, users would want to basically run through their studies using R. And how do we do it is the question. So we are using the POSIT workbench as our launch pad. This is deployed on a traditional EC2 instance, and then either we run ad hoc just to ensure for the users. This is first of all, this is a production platform, but there is a logical grouping where our users would first want to come and test it in a development area, and then move it into the traditional QA and prod. But the way they would first test in the development area is, number one, the entire RStudio POSIT workbench is containerized. So we always ensure that we try to keep up with the latest release of POSIT. I think we are just one release behind at this time. And there are some unique challenges around it. The challenges are mostly about the IQ, OQ, and the time that it takes. For example, it's not just POSIT. There are other vendors who are helping us with this effort. We have to go through a formal process of vetting, validating, and verifying. So all of this takes time. So typically we lag behind. That's one challenge that we have. Number two, because we have containerized, it gives our users the capability to test something that is locked down and be ensured that, again, from a repeatability perspective, containers are the only way that will help them with that. So first, we will go through defining the process and specifying the requirements as to what really needs to go into the container. For example, if our users have identified a set of workflows that they would want for, to help them with the clinical studies that they are looking into. Traditionally, it will map to a set of, if I have to wear a tactical hat, it is eventually going to boil down to our packages. The R packages that need to make it into this container. So this is where we pretty much are using standard technologies and tools that are used in the industry. We have a Jenkins pipeline. We are using the POSIT workbench to, the package manager to lock down versions of our packages that we would want to go into the container. So there are some, business processes that are defined as to what should go into this container in terms of our packages. Once we have defined, we run through the build process to create the container, and we will verify it in the traditional RStudio workbench. Once our users are comfortable that, yes, this is the workflow, this fits our model, and we don't see any issues, that container is then locked, and then it moves into the QA/prod area, and that's where they would run through the, and that is what is deemed as a validated run. Anything that the users would try out in their development environment is a prerequisite, but it is not deemed as a validated run. It is only when it is run through the production that it is deemed as validated. In order to do that, not all of these validated runs behind the scenes will run as a service account user, because we want to ensure that, number one, no particular user runs it in their environment and it runs in a service account. Behind the scenes, we also have the traditional EKS cluster, and where we scale up and launch these containers.
Thank you, Satish. I was just going to say in the chat, I am definitely still learning all of the AWS acronyms too. So if anybody wants to share those in the chat too, that's really helpful. One part of the question earlier that we had missed, and I think would be really helpful to cover as well, is what role does a partner like Atorus play in facilitating the AWS deployment?
Okay, we pretty much rely on Atorus. We are partnering with Atorus mainly for the validation aspect of it, Rachel. And that what I mean by that is all of the R packages that we want to qualify, Atorus is helping us with writing the IQ OQs that need to run. For example, when we build the container, yes, we have a list of our packages, but how do we ensure that they fit the user's requirements? So one advantage, one unique thing that we have done inside this is we do joint collaboration when we build the container, and we run through the automatic process of running through the IQ/OQ steps that has been written by the Atorus team. The advantage is once you go through the container build process, one, we are, as I mentioned earlier, we are verifying, saying that these are the list of our packages that get installed. But at the same time, the scripts will run during the build process, which runs through these IQ/OQ steps. And at the end of the day, it will generate a validation report where we go through each and every IQ step that has been written. It could be install package A, then ensure that all of the functionality within that package fits our requirements. And this is where the OQ part of it helps. So we run through the build process, and then at the end of the day, we inspect the validation report. Then we take a look. Hey, did all of the test cases pass? If it failed, what was the reason? Is this because of an underlying system dependency? Or is this because some other additional package that we forgot needs to be installed? Or is it simply because there was a bug somewhere? And we go through this process. It's an iterative process. This is where Atorus is basically building the entire IQ/OQ part of it and taking responsibility for the validation aspect.
That's great. Thank you.
And I don't know if somebody from Atorus want to chime in as well. I did want to give them the opportunity because they are the ones who are writing this.
Yeah, it's. I would just say it was Satish working with you from the beginning, getting that design of the entire pipeline worked out so that it could all fit within the container build. That being an upfront requirement of what you wanted to see there. But it's been a close relationship with Satish and the business unit to make sure that we can get the right boxes checked for everything that they want to do. But we've gotten this nice fully automated pipeline that's proved fairly resilient when we've gone through updates of everything as we continue to expand and improve the environment. And this has been a combination of some of the internally developed packages within the Janssen team, focusing on some of their environmental workflows, as well as the other packages that are in use within the environment. So there's been a lot of different components of this that have come together to make this focused product for the team to deploy within their space environment.
Thanks, Mike. I want to jump over to some of the Slido questions too, to make sure we get to some of those anonymous ones over there. And one from earlier was, Satish, as data scientists and statisticians request support for open source tools that are new to their organization, how do you think about this? So thinking through tech debt or other issues, I think they're trying to understand your IT's perspective from the requests that you receive.
So yes, so one, there is a fairly easy part of it. That is, what do you need this for? Why do you need it? And that's a simpler question because there will always be a convincing argument from the users where they'll say, I need it to solve this particular problem. However, the other part of it is, as I mentioned earlier, we do have to go through a security process where, some of this, build process that I mentioned earlier, where we go through it, behind the scenes, they come in and scan the container, where they trigger a security validation report to check for vulnerabilities. And then they will flag it. If it's a showstopper, we have to address it. No questions asked, we have to address it. It could be a simple question of installing a newer version of the system dependency. And if our validation fails at that reason, then we will somehow have to ensure that all the checks and balances are, basically we pass all the checks. So when a request for a new tool comes in, we also have to check with with our internal security team to see if if they have any concerns. Most of the times, it's okay, but sometimes they will alert us saying, hey, do you know that there is a vulnerability risk with it? Here is the reason why we are going to stop this. Most often, they will also suggest a workaround or, to see how we can address that. But when a request for a new tool comes in or when a new R package comes in, we have to go through this security checks just to ensure that we don't expose ourselves for any vulnerability. Yes, it is true. Things are sitting behind a firewall. Yes, it is true. They are all running inside a container where the chances are a lot less than when it runs in a traditional a data center. But we do have to ensure that we comply with all of the security risks and challenges.
Thank you very much. I see, Alan, you had asked the question in the chat too. Do you want to jump in next?
Sure. Yeah, hi, Satish. This is really interesting, and I haven't been working with our clinical team for a number of years, so I'm a little bit distant from the sort of state of the art of that operation. But a lot of my experience at the time had to do with just having credibility with our SQA and regulatory teams to, for credibility to work them through a comfort level with supporting what we were doing. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to, like, what did that take between the IT team, the clinical team, the users, to bring them along to these new tools and platforms? I've got to think that there was a lot of change management there, and I'm wondering if there were any sort of critical things that made the difference for you to get regulatory on board with saying, okay, we're comfortable speaking to these systems in an audit, for example.
So let me see how I can.
There's a lot there. Yeah, any parts that work is great.
Yeah. So you mentioned users, and I also mentioned, I think you mentioned regulatory agencies as well. As far as regulate and then our internal validation team, the TQ team, all of that. Let me see if I can address that in bits and pieces of that. One, the users, they were on board with it because, number one, as I said, they would also want to learn from others' experience as well. Mike mentioned the internally developed R packages, so they are also contributing to the open source as well at this time. So there is both, a give and take, learn from each other. So for the users, it was pretty easy, and they were the ones who were saying, hey, we want this because this is going to help us get to where we want, simply because of the open source contribution and because, things were much faster when it came to R. When it came to the TQ team, our internal quality team, right? Number one, they wanted to ensure, one, we were, basically, putting a check mark against everything that they asked for. This was new for them. We had to sit with them. For example, the Docker build process that I mentioned earlier, they had several questions. We had to prove it to them that no matter what I run today, if I have to come back and run it again tomorrow, except for the timestamp that it was built, we had to show and prove that it was going through the same process. No matter how many times we rebuild, we were going to get the exact same result. Yes, there will be some challenges along the way. It wasn't easy because, we were also new to it, but we were able to prove it to them, and it required many, I want to say, weeks, months of effort trying to convince them, because again, sometimes when you are in the vanguard, the onus is on you to prove that what you are doing is not violating any norms, well-established norms and practices. So it took us some time. So once they were convinced that the tools and technologies that we had used conformed to their requirements, they gave their seal of approval. Of course, they were also learning in this process because, again, with cloud technologies, sometimes, they'll ask questions like, hey, what is your failback mechanism? What happens if things go down? And when, as I mentioned earlier, we are all on AWS. So we had to tell them we have the power of AWS. We wouldn't want to worry about something going down or having catastrophic, but yet we had to plan for it, right? We had to plan for it. And then, even something as simple as disaster and recovery, right? How do you recover from it? It's not like you could go and build something immediately in, in another data center, because, we are locked down to a particular AWS region, which is, US Northeast one, that is extremely popular for most of the folks out here, US East one, Northern Virginia region. So we had to basically convince them that, yes, there are some well-founded fears, but no, we don't have to be totally paranoid about it. The question about the health regulatory agencies and, how did we convince them? I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way. If you talk to any health agency as such, they're not going to say you have to restrict yourself to R or SAS or, this is bad or that is good or that is better. We just have to prove it to them that what we ran when they come and ask you for evidence, that we will be able to show the exact same results for the exact same study. And let me stop here because, I don't have any particular experience with that part of it.
Got it. Yeah, thanks. No, I really appreciate hearing that. I think it's impressive. Both really enjoy hearing about the technological pieces, but also about how the organization got there. I think it's pretty impressive that the quality and reg folks have got on board and you've been able to wrap that in all the appropriate change control and quality process stuff that they require. So yeah, it's neat to hear all this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the great questions coming in too. I see Parth, you had asked a question earlier. Do you want to jump in? The question was, is R capable of running production environments with large scale data pipelines? Do you test that capability while validating a system?
Large scale, right? So large is probably going to be a relative term here, Rachel. Many a time we are going to rely on our users to tell us what that is. Yes, we did see some challenges initially, and we are working through that at this time because there might be an odd scenario that we want to ensure that the maximum load can be supported. We are working with, as you know, with Faucet team as well to help us with that, and I feel very positive that we should be able to address some of those issues as well. Because at the end of the day, these requirements will have to come in from our users, and they will define that we want to ensure, I'm going to throw out a number there, like, 100 users concurrently at the same time, or 400 as the case may be here, or 500. We want to be in a position to support that. Sometimes, as folks who are familiar with EKS, yes, when we start, scaling up, there are some delays. It could lead to some frustration on the users where they, instead of seeing things, respond in like a second or two. If it takes even 30 seconds, 30 seconds is way too much for them. What can we do to help alleviate that? There are certain tools and technologies that we are still evaluating at this time. And for those of you folks who are completely familiar and comfortable with EKS, Carpenter, to help us with auto scaling. That is something that we are evaluating at this time. Again, as I said, everything has to be blessed from our security team and from our internal compliance team as well, because even if we have to implement what might be regarded as a small change on the platform, because these are what I consider validated platforms, there is extensive scrutiny that we are subjected to, mainly in terms of documentation. Sometimes it takes a little longer than we would want. For example, we could deploy things in our development environment where it's pretty much open. We can go and evaluate whatever we want, implement it there, and then we will find out, oh my gosh, it took us only 2 minutes to do this, but it is going to take a couple of hours simply because we have to provide proof at each and every step, so that if we have to replicate this at a later time, we have all of those protocols in place. So yeah, it will take a little bit longer to get there, but that is one challenge that we have today.
Thank you. One of the Slido questions, and I know we touched a bit already on the collaboration that happens between teams, especially with security, but do you have any tips about working internally with your peers and leadership to invest in moving towards new platforms?
Yes. One of the things that we have to be cognizant of is the cost aspect of it, right? See, when we do things in the cloud environment, we absolutely need to have our leadership support. That is because with with in-house data centers, with in-house equipment, there is a finite cost that is associated with it, whether it is the initial capital cost or the maintenance cost of it. We know what it is, and we can always project that. The challenge with AWS or with any of the cloud service providers, I want to say cloud provider, is you cannot predict those charges upfront because we generally tend to pay after the fact. So I could, for example, the load testing that we talked about earlier, how much can we go and, how much loads can we test? If we have to start testing, then we will automatically start scaling up. We won't realize it. And then, at the end of the month, when we are handed a bill, I'm like, what? Did I incur so much of cost? They will tell us, here is the reason why. That is a unique challenge. But on the other side of it, consider, post-COVID world, where we were completely shielded because, none of us ever came to a J&J location. We were pretty much remote. We were 100% functional, and all of that was because we were in the cloud. So there are certain benefits as well. The cost part of it, you have to have management support. The huge advantage with that is now, hey, something happened with the instance in your data center. Somebody has to go and physically verify whether it is pulling out a hard disk, replacing it. All of that would cause substantial delays. With any of the cloud providers, you don't have that challenge. Something happened, you stop that, you start it back up because they give you all the tools to be back up and running in no time.
So I see there's a conversation happening in the chat here, and I can't really read it, but I know it started off Mike's question. So Mike, I'd love to have you ask that too.
Thanks. Satish, thanks. It's nice to hear about another big pharma company using containers and the qualification process. I've been at the sharp end of that for many years. And from my perspective, it's fantastic to be able to qualify it once and then deploy it, use it in many, many places. It's one of the big strengths of this approach. But how do you balance up the kind of slow and steady approach of qualification, deployment, keeping things nice and documented and nice and steady, versus colleagues who want latest greatest, give me it tomorrow, I've got an urgent deadline?
Yeah. So let me talk about it from a validated platform perspective, because I think that it's relevant. Yes, we do get asked that question. For example, for one of the more recent studies, it did require us to install a newer version, new package, or which required some system dependencies, and there is no instantaneous answer. That's sadly, when you have to containerize, you have to balance your long-term prospects, saying that yes, there is a short-term pain, but there is a long-term gain. And yes, it does frustrate our users sometimes because we will not be able to react to it, simply because, again, when you go through this build process, you will encounter challenges, trust me. But where I see a silver lining is, we have incredible partners, both from POSIT as well as Atorus, who are helping Janssen with that approach. Right. So anytime we have a challenge, for example, when we deployed our workbench, we, due to the nature of every organization will have their own unique challenges. I'll promise you that every organization. One of the things that we had internally deployed was how we were treating our clinical data in terms of, Active Directory groups, a little bit more tactical. But when we realized that the initial deployment of Workbench did not work out, they were able to quickly, come up with a release and then, come up with an update saying, here is how we are going to help you get there. So we were able to deploy a new version. There, it wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. We wanted, and we were able to adapt that quickly, fairly quickly. But then the process that it takes to get there, documenting each and everything, that there is no shortcut. I'm afraid there's absolutely no shortcut, because our TQ team wants proof that, hey, show us evidence that what you did. So there's extensive IQ/OQ that we go through as well. Yeah, there is absolutely no shortcut, but we always have to tell what is right, do the right thing, as everybody says, saying that, yes, there is a short-term pain, but there is a long-term gain there.
I would also just add that there's a completely separate business unit consideration for this as well, because Mike, with you at Pfizer, you're also another group that has a large group of SaaS users, and the target group that this is going out to in Janssen is that SaaS business unit. So Satish is just one part of this R adoption effort that goes into the packages that are TidyTLG was just released open source, but that was designed to be able to support Janssen standards, to be able to live up to all of that within that group. But then you have all of these business users who have gone through SaaS training to get on board with that. And if you start changing everything underfoot without bringing them along with you too quickly, then that will also upset the business users in a different way. So there's definitely a balance to strike that you need to consider from an organizational standpoint.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I think the kind of folks involved in reporting clinical trials data want it to be nice, controlled, well managed, slow changing, predictable. It's other groups kind of who have more rapid turnaround, and the statisticians in some senses and supporting those groups that want the kind of latest greatest. This has just emerged on CRAN, now I want it because it solves my problem. But I think, like Satish is saying, the process to just simply fold that into the existing framework, it's not as simple as many people think. So I'm agreeing.
Yeah, it never is. It will take some time to get us there. But the one thing that the users absolutely want is stability. We don't want to introduce changes which will potentially break things. So that's a red flag. That's a no-no. And this is where we spend careful amount of time, substantial amount of time ensuring that care is given to ensuring backward compatibility. We don't break things. And this all at the end of the day will depend on how much of IQ, OQ you are willing to go through, how much of effort you are going to put into it. And I think it is well worth it.
I'm getting the feeling that this is a topic we definitely want to stay on. And there's a lot of thoughts on here too. I see Eric, I think you added in, you said you had something to comment on here too. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I had a few of them, but I think the key points that I was commenting on are that containerization, we're looking at this from kind of the broader level for an organization's analytical platform. I'm interested, Satish, if you've been keeping an eye on things like GitHub code spaces, where it's giving, at a repository level, the ability to containerize its environment. I mean, you can do that without GitHub code spaces as well, I suppose. But I'm just curious where your opinion is on maybe those other analysts or statisticians that want to be on the cutting edge for a particular project, and they try to take matters in their own hands if they have little know-how of how containers work with Docker and the like, compared to what you're trying to do from this, more broader effort, which is obviously hugely valuable too.
Yeah. One thing that I must have forgotten to mention is, even with the containers that internally get deployed, our technology services team will tell us, what we could use as a base, right? In other words, we just cannot go and pull anything from Docker Hub. It has to be validated again because they want to do a scan of it. So there are some, I want to say, well-defined requirement. I don't want to call it constraints. It could be as simple as you have to use this version of CentOS 7 container. I'm just throwing out as an example. We can't simply go and use Ubuntu unless it is supported inside our J&J ecosystem. There is, I'm sure folks are familiar with Artifactory. Artifactory is where, we host our container images and where we also pull certain base images as well. So to answer your question, Eric, we cannot go and pull directly from GitHub, but to answer a second part of it is, say, for example, if you were to point me to some GitHub repo, can you support this? The short answer is maybe. And the reason I said maybe is we can go and take a look into it, see what software modules are being installed as a part of it towards, in the container, see what it is that we could immediately use, or if it requires some sort of a substitution by, say, for example, some other equivalent package, then we will go and download it, install it. All of that, so long as it is blessed by our technology services team, we'll be able to do it. So the same challenge exists for our users as well. They have to rely on somebody in IT to help build them that. Yes, we are deploying pipelines, for example. Mike referred to the internally developed R package as well. We are now establishing pipelines where users, the business partners that we work with, can develop an R package. And by simply doing the cut and paste of the basic necessities of the pipeline. Okay, we use Jenkins pipeline. We call it Jenkins Pipeline Manager. So they'll take that part of the infrastructure code, replicate it, and then work on what they are best qualified to do. That is, work on the R package and not have to worry about the mundane aspects of, oh, how do I build it? How do I lint it? Because all of that is streamlined to a point where we run through the linting, unit testing process, all of it when an R package is being built. So we help them with by deploying those pipelines as well. So we make it sort of easier on them, but sometimes I might be trivializing things. Some users might find it a little bit more challenging for their tests. But we are trying to templatize it, see, and to minimize disruption to the users, or to minimize learnings for our users. Because that's infrastructure, right? I mean, they might be focused more on clinical trial reporting efforts than have to worry about mundane activities like, oh, how do I build this? Because that's IT.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's very helpful. And I consider myself one of maybe 4 or 5 people in my entire organization that likes both sides of that spectrum. But we can't expect all the statisticians to be as geeky about this as people like me. So
yeah.
Nick, I see you had a great comment on building the adoption, and I'd love to spend a few minutes talking about that too, if you want to jump in.
Sure. Is there a specific question? Or?
Well, no, I just saw you were talking about like educating the users about validation as well.
Right. Yeah. This goes back to Mike's question around, how do you deal with validated versus like having the latest, greatest. So yeah, I just threw in my 2 cents. I think the big part from our side is really education. So I guess Eric kind of mentioned as well, a lot of the users don't really care, but you have to sort of help them understand this is difficult, right? It's not just, I want this, let's have it. We have to consider, accuracy, reproducibility, traceability of these things. Utmost important is that our results are correct and they understand that, right? So that's kind of what we use to make sure, like, okay, we have to validate this. Here's what it takes to do it. It's significant effort. So that takes a little time, but then really use case driven. So sometimes people ask for things just because they want them, but then when you say, well, what do you want to use it for? You start getting more details that they don't really need it. So having that use case driven validation, what do you need it for? Why do you need it? Is it for production, or is it something you could just use as like an exploratory environment, right? Do we really have to validate this? And that really shortens the list a lot more. And then once we get to, okay, we get it, you need it. We don't have the expertise as like the team that's overseeing it. You're now sort of our de facto expert on this. Put some skin in the game, help us out with this. And then sometimes they're willing to do it versus maybe they say, well, I see you've already validated the stats package is approved for use. I could do the stats package instead. Let me just use that, and it sort of helps, again, shorten that list down. So.
Thank you. It's really helpful.
Sure thing.
Travis, I realized I had missed a question of yours earlier, and I wanted to have you jump in next with your question.
Did I ask a question that wasn't answered?
I think you did. So it was earlier when I missed it, but it was about, are there any open source IQ, OQ pipelines for R?
Oh, yeah. Mike had some good commentary in the chat around that too.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess sort of the source of my question was, for many use cases and clinical research like we're doing, it would seem that the IQ/OQ need not be overly complicated, because if we just want to ensure that R was properly installed and can run dplyr, dbplyr pipelines, can run a regression, a time to event analysis without trouble, we're not doing anything fancy. It would seem, couldn't I just do some minimal set of checks for which someone might write a reasonable starting point in the open source realm for like, has R actually properly installed and does it actually do these 3-4 packages do the thing that they're supposed to do? Just curious about like what a minimum viable product for that might look like, but this is of course Torres's realm of expertise, so I really don't know what those answers would look like.
Yeah, and just to note, one of the things that we've really taken the guidance from is the work that was done in the R Validation Hub to start defining what a risk-based approach to validation is around that. So for things like a lot of the base R stuff, a lot of the tidyverse maintained packages, those are, Nick, what is the term that we landed on? Accepted for that, where you can run the package unit tests and you can accept that. But again, part of this is also documenting the evidence that that was done so that you can pass those through Satish's team, get the report so that we can log that into the QA systems so that you have the evidence and the traceability that that was done. But then, like Nick says, when you get into other things, and especially getting into the more statistical realm of things, having use case driven approaches around what you're looking for, how you can defend the integrity of that. And then my comment back to you was, you're saying that it works. What does work mean? What is the kind of baseline that you're assessing that against? So there's a lot of kind of questions that you need to go in and investigate and answer that, so that you're defending yourself, because all of this comes back to what happens if you have to undergo an audit. What if a regulatory agency comes back to you and then starts asking the questions of how you're verifying what you're doing? So that's the worst case scenario in something like this would be that something is turned around because of the integrity of your system was questioned. And pharma, I think that a lot of times those so pharma is extremely risk averse just because of the investment that goes into getting where things are. Statistical programming is an extremely small window in the larger scope of everything that's going on. And no one wants to be the person who kind of is a showstopper for something, or even delays can just be extremely costly. But yeah, it's we're working in an extremely risk-averse industry.
That's a fascinating answer, especially regarding the unit test for that. I mean, hadn't occurred to me, but it's probably a good message to developers, like write good unit tests, and then there's actually almost unintended but fortunate downstream consequences of writing good unit tests. So you could just write out that report that, like, for example, the tidyverse unit tests, which I know are comprehensive and good, check out. That's awesome.
Yeah, and one of the things that at least our technology services team is pushing for is to ensure that every R package goes through some static analysis saying, okay, here's what's being deployed. Is this like, did it go through all the checks and balances? Sometimes it's impossible and sometimes it's not possible. And it depends on who you're talking to. For the users, does it work for my particular use case? Go deploy the package. Somebody else comes in later and finds out that it's causing a conflict. That's that's a red flag. Sometimes security might only be looking at it from a slightly different perspective. They don't care about the functionality. They care about the security aspect of it. So if it passes all the vulnerabilities checks, then you're good to go from their perspective. But I go back to this comment that you had earlier, Travis, that, hey, I just installed it. Did it work? I'm going to go and use it. There is a danger, as Mike pointed out. I've personally seen one effort, at least, I don't want to say fail, but it has reached a point where nobody wants to use this because, IT took this approach that, yeah, we're going to build this, going to do minimal qualification. For us, if it installed R, good, it passed our check. Then they said it's on the users like Nick and others to go install the R packages for what they want. And then they suddenly realize that, as everybody knows in the R ecosystem, most of the packages our users can install. There is the small subset that is sometimes, it requires a Unix dependency, which is easy. but sometimes it does require things to be hand-built. And that's where the users say, I don't have this expertise, and I'm sorry, I just cannot use this. So there is a danger to it when you do minimal qualification. I, for one, certainly don't believe in it and wouldn't encourage that. We have to take our users' workflow, ensure that everything is tested accurately. As Mike pointed out, it's just to make sure that we defend ourselves. God forbid if there is an audit and we have to show evidence of what we ran a couple of years ago. Trust me, that short-term pain leading to long-term gain, it's accurate in this place.
Thank you, Satish. I know we have a few minutes until the top of the hour here. Walter, I see you had asked a question a few minutes ago. Do you want to jump in and ask that? And oh, there you are. Yep, I can hear you.
Great. No, I was just curious because I understand that the versioning and the environment and everything for like say critical packages or critical tests that are maybe developed and deployed as packages need to be in place. But I'm working in the finance industry, and so we also have Artifactory in place for, let's say, less critical, like convenience packages. And I just wanted to ask if they are mixing these using Artifactory maybe as a package mirror, internal package mirror for less critical packages, like user convenience stuff and these things, or if they like keep everything on the POSIT package manager. Just out of curiosity, because you mentioned them having Artifactory, having Jenkins pipelines in place and things like that. Just thanks for the info.
Yeah, so we will not distinguish whether a particular package is less important or one is more important, Walter. We just don't take that approach. If a user wants a package, we just go through the entire process of IQing, OQing. Yes, it will be in POSIT package manager. Yes, we will snapshot it. We will use the exact same snapshot to replicate it. But no, we do not say, hey, these are less important. This is going to, not go through any qualification or any such thing like that. We just go through the totality of it. And as Nick pointed out earlier, the question will always be, why do you need this package? And once that question is answered, from an IT perspective, it really doesn't matter towards the importance of that package.
Yeah, but I was just curious, because as I said, sometimes it makes sense to put the full force behind it, but sometimes if it's just like some reporting or some small shiny dashboard that you want to share with colleagues internally, that probably maybe overkill to have it go through the whole process. I was just curious if you had this approach as well, because where I come from, we have it. That's why I was just curious. Yeah, thanks.
Now, it will be a little bit hard to treat it as a validated environment if we haven't gone through the checks and balance world.
And one more question on packages too. I see, Javier, you had a question going back to the containers.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've been in and out with side conversations with work, so my apologies if this was covered. But we have a similar setup where we build containers and have kind of snapshots of RStudio Package Manager. And as I guess one of the heavier users of R at the company, something that, is not a big deal, just a weekly annoyance, is that the versions of the packages that are loaded in these containers are, specific versions that might have been snapped, let's say 6 months ago. So the first thing I do when I load my RStudio IDE, which is in the cloud, is to update the packages that are persisting, and then I install additional packages that I need for my workflow or Shiny app, etc. So I was just curious if you had, it'd be excellent if the package versions that were kind of booted when I loaded my RStudio would be the current versions of those packages deemed for persistence. And that's just something, I don't know that there's a better solution to what we have right now. I didn't know if there was, maybe a recommendation you had.
For a validated environment, the short answer is you just have to rebuild the container.
Yeah,
And there is no other alternative. However, the process is, if you need new versions of existing packages, then you just go through the basic IQ/OQ that was already written for that package. But if there's new functionality that you want to adopt, yes, you will have to write new IQ/OQs, no questions asked. But there is no shortcut here. You just have to repeat and rinse through this entire process.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. And we go through this, whenever, we have to build a new container from an IT perspective, right? We do check with users like Nick first. Hey, did it meet your requirement? And they have their own acceptance testing as well. Then he'll come back and say, nope, something failed. I need you to look into it. Yes, it's basically it's repeat and rinse, right? So you go through this process all over again. So go back to the drawing board, add the package in, add any system dependencies, run through your IQ, release the container in development for users to test. And once they say, yep, this all looks good, it's at that time we quote unquote lock the container.
I know we just passed the hour mark here, and a few people had to jump off for other meetings. But I just want to say thank you so much, Satish, for sharing your experience with us, and also the Ataurus team for joining. Satish, you are such a wealth of knowledge, and it's been great getting to see more of the IT experience as well that we don't always get to talk about in these Hangouts. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.